there's a scene in one of the first or second episodes that I'm in where Rick calls everyone together in the church and we have a meeting, and just before we go to the hilltop, I think. And Lenny stands up, Morgan stands up in the middle of everyone and gives like a speech to everyone. And I just, like, that man has like a great energy, and when he stood up, like obviously as the character, but like it comes from the actor, like he just commanded the space and like has such a, it just comes through in his voice. And so any of the stuff that I had to do with him, and I was really happy that, although I was kind of thinking, you know, because in the comic books, Jesus has a fight with Negan and Beta, and like he really like gets in there, and the only person I thought was someone who was on my team. But at the same time, it was really amazing to do that with Lenny, because he and I both trained really hard, and Lenny knew exactly what he was doing with his bow staff and everything, and it was really great for us to test it out against each other. But then we had like a big face-off in that scene, and then we had when we all go back to the sanctuary, or the outpost, and we have a face-off there as well, like, he just has such a great energy in him, and it's similar to what I then had with Michael Sheen on Prodigal Son. He's very present and in the moment, and it's cool, because you're just like, you're both right there, like, facing off against each other, and he's also a very nice man. But it's just nice when you're with actors who are very present and there and willing to like really go for it in the scene. So it was cool. So I really like working with him. And I like working with like, Chandler was also fun. I had a little bit with him, that was really cool. Because he has a different energy to everyone. Like Rick and Daryl are both quite like hard-bitten and closed as characters. And Chandler's character was quite open, and Lenny's character was quite open. So you really feel like you're more like trading emotions and really getting in there. Yeah. So probably. And I had a little bit with Stephen. I really like Stephen Young, and I love Glenn as a character. It was really cool to. I was so lucky in that first episode that I got to hang out with everyone, like Michael Cudlitz and Lauren and everyone, and lead everyone up to the hilltop. It was really cool. Introduction, yeah. But it's like also a complete whirlwind. Like I look back on it, that's like 7 years ago now, something ridiculous. I'm like, wow, it was because I hadn't worked for a year up until that point, and then suddenly I was in the biggest television show on the planet. It was just like, what? And then when the show premiered, I went to the premiere before anyone knew what I was doing on the show. It was at Madison Square Garden, and I sat with my girlfriend, and we were just sat in the audience. And everyone was screaming, and Norman rode up on a motorcycle, and I was really scared. I was like, oh shit, and you don't know any of these things for certain, but I really had that thing of like, oh my god, my life is going to change in a way that I have to be comfortable with, because it's going to happen, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. And it's really like the loss of anonymity and those things, which it was really nice to get back afterwards, and I cut my hair off, and Prodigal Son I do get recognised for, but it wasn't anywhere near as successful as Walking Dead. So, and Walking Dead I had the long hair and the beard for 3 years, and I couldn't go anywhere in the world, really. Like, that show was so huge, and I remember sitting in Madison Square Garden and kind of knowing that, and knowing it was coming, and kind of taking a deep breath about it, because it's great, you know, being famous is great, and you get the nice restaurant tables, and you know, it's like all these kinds of things, but at the same time, you can't live your life. You can't go to the grocery store, and that's weird. It's lovely. I mean, I was also very lucky that my character was well liked, because other people had characters that people didn't like, and they just get abuse in the streets, and I didn't get that, so I was very fortunate with that. But when you're just trying to buy like your groceries, like I'm always there to talk to people and be happy, but like, and I love talking to nice fans, but at the same time it would get in the way a lot. But when I first would go home from doing conventions, my wife would just be like, well, you're not that famous. And like, you don't really understand, because The Walking Dead, their fans were every age, shape, sex, size, all around the world. And so it's not like, I had some degrees of fame before where I'm like, oh, it's going to be teenagers that recognize me, or it's going to be this. The Walking Dead was just everyone. So then my wife joined me on a couple of trips, and even she was like, wait, where did that person come from? We're like, wait, and people would meet you at airports, and she questioned people. She was like, how do you know that we were on that flight? And like, oh, my friend works for the airline, or like whatever. And it's just wild. And so she got it. She understood it a lot more. And but it was a really, yeah, The Walking Dead was a moment in time. It was really cool to be a part of. And I'm sure like 10, 20, 15 years we'll get together again and there'll be a reunion and everything. But it was a very specific experience because no one expected it to be as big as it was either. And it just, yeah, it was the biggest show in the world for a time, which is wild.
Oh, what are some of your favorite films that you enjoy watching?
Oh, that's hard. Well, I have a son now, so I don't get to watch that many films. But I'm a big David Fincher fan. I like all of his stuff. And I haven't seen Zodiac. That's the one thing that I really need to catch up on. But I like Denis Villeneuve, his films. I still haven't seen Dune. I need to catch up on that. I just watched Get Out for the first time, and that was not what I was expecting at all. It's basically a Twilight Zone episode, that movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I get it now why he took over the Twilight Zone and rebooted that. I don't know really. There's nothing. What's been recently good? I don't know. I did what just one Best Picture. I've been slowly catching up on stuff.
I think Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh yeah, so I saw that. I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I saw and I was happy that won actually, because it was Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it was I enjoy that they really went for something, and they did it on a budget as well. Like it wasn't super expensive, that movie. I like what Blumhouse does. I think they're very clever with what they do. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have favorites. But I generally go by recommendation, because when you don't have much time, you're like, okay, just tell me what's good and I'll watch that. I'm curious about Oppenheimer, because I think Dunkirk, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. And I do like Christopher Nolan, so I'm curious about Oppenheimer. I auditioned for Barbie, so I'm curious about that. I'm really curious to see how well that movie does. And I heard that Mission Impossible is really good. I'm down to watch those big action movies, and I do think Tom Cruise is kind of standing on his own making those movies now. And I think there's a part, you know, I like the superhero thing, and I would definitely not say no to being in one, but I do feel that we need more films of different types, and I'm really happy that Top Gun did really well. And I really hope that Oppenheimer and Barbie and Mission Impossible will do really well, because the industry, it's a business, right? So the business will make the films that make the money, and the superhero films have been making money for so long now, but recently they haven't. And so I think things will be changing in the next 5 years, and I'm excited. I mean, for Kevin's movie that I was just in, like, it's a big, epic Western, and it's old school storytelling, which I think people appreciate and want to see again, and it's not CGI every 5 seconds. I saw Chris Nolan said today there is no CGI in Oppenheimer. I find that hard to believe, but I did see a headline today where he said that, and if that's true, then that's great. Like I'm all about that, because I think people need. I think the superhero movies do really well, and I do think they ground things, but I think people want real stories about real things again, a little bit more, and I'm excited for that. Yeah. Someone else? Hi.
So you said that you had read the comic books before.
Yeah.
Were you right about the part that you thought you were going to be getting, or trying
So
to get?
No, I didn't read them before I got there, because there's so much, you know. There's like, I think by the time I joined there had already been 100 issues of the comic book, so I didn't really have time. Even after I was cast, I just didn't have time. I was on set so quickly. So I read them after I had shot those first 3 episodes, between season 6 and season 7. And I actually think, I've said this multiple times, like, I think I did myself a bit of a disservice, because the part in the comic books is different to the part in the show. And he gets to do some really cool shit in the comic books, which I didn't get to do in the show, which made me kind of sad and annoyed. Because I was looking forward to that stuff, and I trained for it, and I was like, okay, cool, I might get a fight with Negan, and I might be part of this, and all this kind of stuff, and none of it happened. And yeah, I don't think it was very healthy for me to have read them and then be like, okay, none of this stuff's happening. But having said that, like, I was happy with what I had, and and what I ended up doing on the show. But he was really cool in the comic books, but he's also tall in the comic books, and I'm not tall, so that was a difference too.
Yep, back there.
Did you enjoy the psychological aspects of Prodigal Son, or was that something that was difficult for you to deal with all the time?
I enjoyed it. It's weird. Jobs come to you in this profession kind of when they're meant to, and they come to the, you know, sometimes the casting is like exactly right. So I don't have a serial killer for a father, and I love my dad very much, and I think he's great. But in my own personal life, there are family issues and things. You know, I am British, and I come from a country where people aren't very good at expressing their emotions, and so I have a lot of pent-up emotion inside of me, and I have from a young age, and I still do. So that project, not that it was like, it was cathartic, but not in a direct way of like, oh, I'm going to go to work and cry about my family. But you can't help but be like, you know, express those things when you're in a situation where the person in front of you is playing your father or playing your mother or your sister. And so I was very, I in my own life am a very emotionally open person, but it's hard to be like that with my family, unfortunately, because it's weird. It's like a bit too painful, because there's so much unexpressed love and conversations that you want to have. So that job was the right one for me because I was able to just fall into that, and I didn't it didn't have to work hard at that side of it. So that was, and also like there was a lot of wacky. That show required everything of me that I can do, really. And then after that, I was like worried, like, shit, is that it? Is that the end of my acting career now? Because I did the physical stuff in Walking Dead, which I was pretty adept at, and then did all the emotional stuff in Prodigal Son. I'm like, oh shit, what do I do now? You know. But yeah, it was cathartic, I guess, but it was still enjoyable. I really stretched myself, and you had to, like, someone like Michael Sheen is just. It's difficult in a scene sometimes to not be like, motherfucker, how did you do that? Like, that was so clever what you just did, or like so fun, because he's always grounded, so he can get away with doing like wild and crazy things, but it's always believable and always works. Like, he knows the genre that he's in. He's just a very talented actor. So I learned a lot from working with him, and he stretched me. You know, you can't get away. Like, you have to fully commit. And it was great. It was everything I wanted, but it was exhausting. And also, then the second season was during COVID, and that was even more exhausting because there was nothing. I couldn't escape. Like, we came to work, we got tested, we couldn't really socialize with anyone. I went home to my apartment on my own, and like, it was a really weird time during. And so on the last day of filming, I burst into tears because on my last negative test. Because for me as the lead of the show, if I tested positive, then nobody works that day, so everyone's out of a job for 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, and that's a huge amount of pressure. So there was a huge amount of pressure on me for the whole of that second season, and I got my last negative test and just burst into tears because I got to the end of it, you know, and kept everyone in employment, which was at that time, as everyone, I'm sure, so many people in this room struggled during that time, and that was it was hard. So to be able to provide employment was such a big deal. So yeah, it was emotion in the job, and then also emotion outside the job. But it was also a special time, and I'm very happy to have been able to do that. Yeah. Hi.
What was your favorite season of Walking Dead
that I was in? Wow, weirdly, I think maybe the first one, the first and the last, I guess, because I had the most to do. Like, in the first 3 episodes of my time on The Walking Dead, I probably had the most I had to do for the whole time I was on the show. And that's kind of how it goes. Like, you get introduced and you have some action, and then you're just kind of there, because other characters get introduced and other stuff happens. And then my last season, I was dead by episode 8. And I was on a 7-episode contract, so I was in, like, you know, a lot of that as well. The first season I came back on season 7, you didn't see me for 7 episodes or 6 episodes at the beginning of the season. which is pretty wild. So yeah, probably the first season. But then that was kind of all over in a flash, and yeah. What was it? Yeah, good time. But yeah, I think those first 3 episodes are probably my favourite. But then also not my favourite because I was wearing all fake hair, which I hated. Like I hated wearing the fake beard and the fake extension. So I looked the best in my last season as far as I was concerned. Like I really fit the character in that last season. In the first season it's all fake and annoying and I can't move my mouth in the way that I want to move my mouth and it's fucking hot and it keeps slipping on my face. And, it's like a lot of extra stuff to deal with. But as far as what I had to do, probably first 3. And the last couple. Hey.
Did Norman ever get you with one of his legendary pranks on set?
No, I'm not important enough. No, it was mainly him and Andy with that because of that really. Like you would never dare. Like I wouldn't fuck with anyone who was like higher up on the call sheet than me because then I'm, it's not going to make my life easy then. But I was there for a lot of the glitter in the AC of Andy's car, and then Andy putting his bike on the pontoon, pushing it out to the middle of the lake. That all happened when I was there, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't involved in it though. I literally wouldn't dare. I don't want to make my life harder.
If you said reading the comics kind of ruined it a little bit for you because it was so different, did they tell you not to read them if it was like that, or was it a personal choice?
Yeah, it was a personal choice because I want to do my research. Like any job that I do, I want to know enough as much as I can about the character, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. There's like a Bible for this character. That's fantastic. And a lot of times they did follow that structure for other characters, but for mine they just threw it all out the window. Actually his introduction was kind of similar. But yeah, for me it was just like, okay, well this is what I can do. This is the only thing that I can do because I don't know what it's like to be in a zombie apocalypse. I played The Last of Us video game when I joined because I heard that was really good and it was really helpful actually playing that. But otherwise, I didn't know any other way to get into it really. So that was my only thing to go by. And they're really good, so I'm happy I read them. It was fun to read them. But yeah, unfortunately, didn't play out. I mean, people would bring me the comic books to sign, and I'd go, oh yeah, that's where he fights Negan. And like, oh yeah, that's really cool. He catches a grenade and he throws it back. I mean, that would have been easy to put in, but we didn't. No, but like I said, I had some fun stuff. So, and I did actually. It was my decision and my idea to have him wear the armor that he wears in the last few episodes because that's from the comic book. And I was like, well, we've got to do that. That's really cool. That's kind of iconic look from the comic books. So I was happy that we got that in. And him and Aaron never got together in the show, but then I like to say, like, in the 7 years time gap, they probably did, and then they're like, let's just be friends after a bit. But yeah, the comic books are good, and I mean, he lives till the end in the comic books.